It thought the human would be easy. All the data, all the observed behavior patterns, all the neural scans, they pointed to a single conclusion: humans were volatile but simple. Predictable. Programmable. Breakable. So when the Zalari sovereignty deployed Parasite Unit 77B to Earth's surface, it expected swift domination. It wasn't the first control entity sent to assimilate an emerging species. But it might be the last. The capsule descended silently through the upper atmosphere, cloaked in electromagnetic veils to evade satellites and scanners. It wasn't large, just the size of a basketball, but inside was an organism bred solely to infiltrate organic neural networks. A wetware ghost. A hijacker of thought. Its mission: find an isolated subject, preferably one whose mental state showed signs of instability or trauma, and interface. Override. Assimilate. Through them, it would access military networks, key personnel, infrastructure. Collapse from within. The pod streaked over the pine-covered hills of Wyoming before slowing, correcting, and zeroing in on a single structure, a wooden cabin tucked deep within the wilderness. No signal. No heat signatures save one. The perfect target. Inside the cabin, the human stirred. Her name was Naomi Greaves. 32. Ex-USAF signals analyst. Officially discharged. Unofficially buried in a classified report after a mission in Syria went very wrong. She didn't talk about it. Didn't talk to anyone, really? Not since her husband Daniel died on deployment 2 years ago. Naomi chopped wood by hand now. She lived off rainwater, solar panels, and the quiet. Not because she was preparing for the end, she'd already survived hers. The capsule dropped like a hawk toward the roof, soft landing with an almost imperceptible thud. Naomi didn't hear it. The wind was howling. But the cabin did notice. Specifically, the motion sensor network Naomi had wired herself clicked on. A silent alert pinged her retinal HUD, an artifact of the military they never really uninstalled. She froze. Area 12 perimeter breach. It read. Unknown signature. Velocity decreasing. She dropped the axe. Outside, the capsule opened like an obsidian flower. From its core slithered something like mercury with teeth, no visible eyes, no limbs, just tendrils of hyper-adaptive tissue, constantly reforming, constantly sampling the air, the ground, the data. The creature glided toward the cabin. Inside, Naomi was already at the wall panel, flipping switches. Electric current surged around the property, crackling along the fence line. But the intruder didn't even flinch. It didn't need to. Metal and volts weren't its enemy. It bypassed the field, slipped through a vent, and entered the cabin like a thought. Naomi spun, pistol drawn. Then everything went black. For her. And impossibly bright for it. Initiating interface. 77B threaded its root tendrils into her neural cortex, past the thalamus and amygdala, into the neocortex, where higher thought resided. Where the essence of Naomi lived. But the deeper it dove, the stranger it got. This wasn't a clean system. This wasn't standard synaptic behavior. The creature had studied thousands of minds, human, reptilian, aquatic, insectoid, but this was warped. It was like swimming through shattered glass. There were memories, horrible ones, looping and knotting like barbed wire. A helicopter spiraling from the sky. Screams in the comms. A blood-soaked uniform. A ring left behind in the sand. Emotion struck it like a thunderclap. Fear. Not hers. Its own. This wasn't part of the mission. Parasite units weren't supposed to feel. But Naomi had felt too much. And now so did it. Still, 77B pressed forward, determined to override her will. It located the decision centers, the speech centers, the motor cortex. If it could just push through, she'd be its puppet. It reached for the limbic system, only to be yanked back violently. Not this one, a voice said. But Naomi hadn't moved her lips. 77B paused. Scanned. There were no other lifeforms. No AI. Just her. You wanted access? She said again, this time with her mouth, But her voice, it echoed with something deeper. You're in my mind now. And I don't let invaders in without a fight. That wasn't how this was supposed to work. The interface wasn't designed for combat. But Naomi Greaves had been in mental combat for years. Forcing compliance. 77B tried again. Flooded her visual cortex with false signals. Tried to simulate trust, project calm. She responded by dragging the parasite into a memory. One she chose. It was the desert. A mission site. She and Daniel, sharing a sunrise over the ruins of Palmyra. Quiet. Hopeful. But the colors began to burn. And suddenly, the moment rewound, on loop. The sunrise. The smile. The silence. Then, the explosion. Daniel gone. Over and over. 77B screamed, though it had no mouth. Naomi stood over it, in her own mind, arms crossed. You think this is bad? I live here. The parasite thrashed. Tried to retreat from her hippocampus. Naomi followed. Like a shadow. Like vengeance. What are you? It cried, in a thought-burst pulse. She didn't answer. Instead, she forced it into another fragment. A hospital. Her mother flatlining. A doctor too busy checking his watch. The grief, the guilt, it wasn't just emotional, it was visceral. The parasite could feel its own shape faltering. Get out, Naomi said. Now. But it couldn't. Not easily. Her synapses had wrapped around it. Like thorns. 77B realized too late, it had entered a fortress masquerading as a broken mind. She wasn't vulnerable. She was armed. Outside the cabin, birds flew away as a sudden scream, half human, half static, rattled the trees. Naomi gasped awake. She staggered, fell to her knees, and vomited. Her body trembled. Every nerve had been touched. She looked down at her arm. A tiny black worm was writhing beneath the skin, trying to retreat. She grabbed the fireplace poker and drove it through her bicep. The creature let out one last mental shriek, and died. Smoke. Blood. Silence. She collapsed beside the fire, breathing hard, tears mixing with sweat. Then she laughed. Just once. Short. A voice crackled from her wrist HUD. Naomi. We've got an anomaly. Are you online? She didn't answer immediately. She looked around the room that had just hosted a war no one would ever believe. Finally, she tapped her wrist. Yeah, she whispered. I'm here. But something in her tone had shifted. The HUD pinged again. You okay? Naomi looked toward the broken vent. Toward the ash pile near the hearth. Then she looked inward. No, she said. But I will be. The parasite was dead. Or so Naomi thought. But what she didn't know, what no human could have known, was that 77B wasn't a singular entity. It was a node. A spore in a vast fungal mind that spanned galaxies, linked through quantum resonance, and buried deep in the void between stars. Killing the unit didn't kill the connection. It triggered a response. From a dark corner of space, the sovereignty stirred. Parasite Unit 77B had gone silent. That had never happened before. Across their long history of domination, every species they'd encountered had folded under the same tactic: find the emotional weak point, inject the control thread, shatter identity, assume dominance. But this human, this Naomi Greaves, she'd repelled the invasion. Not with strength, but with pain. With a mind so scarred it had become impenetrable. And now, the sovereignty wanted to know why. That night, as snow fell quietly over the cabin, Naomi sat awake, her arm bandaged, a trail of bloody towels in the sink. The HUD still pinged every 15 minutes. She ignored it. Instead, she stared at the fire, nursing a cup of black coffee, replaying everything in her head. The thing had tried to use her grief as a weapon. It had walked into her worst memories, clawed at her soul. But it hadn't broken her. Because she was already broken. Try harder next time, she muttered. The cabin lights flickered. Naomi's eyes narrowed. That wasn't normal. She moved toward the main panel. Solar batteries were at 90%. No surges. No external interference logged. Then she felt it. Pressure. Not physical. Mental. Something brushing against the edge of her thoughts. Like a whisper behind a locked door. Knock, knock. She didn't answer. Bang. It wasn't a parasite this time. Not a small unit. It was something else, deeper. Older. A presence. A network. The sovereignty had decided to initiate a direct link. Naomi dropped her cup. The coffee splattered across her boots, but she didn't move. She was staring at the fire, but she didn't see it. Because she was somewhere else. Inside. Again. But this time, the room wasn't hers. It was massive, endless. A cathedral made of neural strands and light. Floating orbs pulsed above her, each one radiating cold intelligence. And they were watching her. This is not protocol, Naomi said out loud. You're not supposed to interface directly. You're not built for it. A low thrumming shook the space. Not sound, emotion. We observe. A voice, but not one. A collective resonance. You resisted Node 77B. Naomi folded her arms. Yeah. And if you're here to try again, get in line. You are broken. She laughed, dry and cracked. You don't say. Broken minds should shatter easily. That's the thing, she said, stepping forward. When something breaks enough times, the pieces get sharp. The orbs pulsed, analyzing her. Synaptic rate. Adrenaline levels. Memory structure. We do not understand. No, Naomi said softly. You don't. And that's your problem. She took another step. The neural floor rippled beneath her feet. You think control comes from force. That emotions are weaknesses. But humans? We live in our pain. We grow from it. We remember it. It defines us. The sovereignty pulsed again. Your memories are chaotic. Unorganized. Damaged. Damn right they are, she said. But they're mine. And then, without warning, she reached out and touched one of the orbs. It screamed. Not from pain. From shock. The neural pathway recoiled. She wasn't supposed to be able to interact. She was a subject, not a participant. But Naomi had spent years in signal warfare. Her brain still retained the implants, the backdoors, the reflexive coding. She understood how minds could be mapped. How signals could be intercepted. Now she was intercepting them. Let me show you something, she said, and dragged the sovereignty into her mind. The endless cathedral flickered, then shattered, replaced by the roaring sound of a battlefield. Gunfire. Screams. The sharp crack of radios barking orders. And her. Naomi, 26, dragging her bleeding captain across the sand, one arm broken, tears streaking the dust off her face. You feel that? She whispered. That's terror. The orbs trembled. She shifted the scene. Now it was the VA hospital. Daniel lying there. Pale. Eyes closed. One hand still warm. You feel this? She snapped. That's grief. Another shift. She was a child now, watching her father throw her mother against a wall. Her own hands covering her ears. This is fear. Learn it. The sovereignty began to retreat. The interface tried to shut down. Naomi pushed harder. You wanted to see inside us? She screamed. Then look. All the way in. A cascade of memories flooded the shared space. Boot camp. First kill. Her wedding. The day she stopped praying. The time she almost ended everything, and didn't. Each one came with emotion sharp enough to tear skin. The sovereignty tried to break the link. It couldn't. Naomi's mind had latched on. Like a virus. Like vengeance. Outside, in the real world, her body trembled violently. Her nose bled. Alarms were going off in her HUD. Oxygen dropping. She didn't care. Let me show you why I survived. The scene shifted again. Now it was the cabin. Just last week. Snow falling. Naomi sitting alone at the window. A rifle across her lap. A photo of Daniel in her hands. And then, hope. A single thought. I'm still here. The sovereignty couldn't process it. Pain, it understood. Rage, it had seen. But this quiet, defiant hope. It broke the pattern. The network pulsed wildly. And then, it fractured. The connection severed like a snapped cable. Naomi's body convulsed, then went limp. She collapsed to the cabin floor. Smoke rose from the vent behind her. Sparks burst from the solar array. The wind howled through the cracks in the roof. But the pressure in her mind was gone. When she awoke, it was morning. She was cold. Her limbs ached. Her chest burned. But she was alive. And not alone. On the wooden floor beside her was something she hadn't seen in years. A single red rose. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. But it was warm to the touch. And inside her mind, just for a second, she heard it. We will not return. She smiled. And fainted. Naomi didn't remember how long she was unconscious. But when her eyes opened again, it wasn't the firelight that greeted her. It was sunlight. Streaming through the window in sharp golden beams, casting shadows of the broken blinds on her floor. For a moment, she didn't move. Every muscle ached. Her chest felt like it had been kicked by a mule. And her head throbbed with the low hum of too many thoughts not meant to be thought by any one person. She sat up slowly. The red rose was gone. Vanished. No petals. No stem. No sign it had ever been there. But she remembered the warmth of it. And the voice. We will not return. Naomi stood. The floor creaked beneath her feet, and she braced against the table as the cabin spun. Her HUD was dark, fried from the surge. Every system was offline. She'd been alone before. But this time felt different. She'd stared down an ancient network of predatory minds. And she'd made them blink. Still, she didn't feel victorious. She felt watched. Because even if they said they wouldn't return, she didn't believe it. Not fully. Not until she knew why. The sovereignty didn't retreat out of mercy. They retreated because something changed. Something in her mind, or something she triggered. And if she didn't understand it, they might come back. So Naomi did what she hadn't done in years. She called for help. BZZT, static. BZZT. The emergency uplink was weak, but still intact. She rewired the battery to the dish and angled it manually through the window toward the sky. Command Post Echo 17, this is retired Operative Greaves. Authentication Echo Dagger Blue. I've encountered something. Non-human. Neural. I need exocyte support and a black box data link. I am not compromised, but I've been connected. Silence. Then. Repeat last. Did you say non-human? She smiled bitterly. Yeah. That's right. You've got yourself a first contact scenario. And it didn't go like the movies. The signal locked. Within 4 hours, they sent a drone. Within 12, they sent a man. And not just any man. Dr. Julian Reis. Gray suit, silver hair, neural implants in both temples. The man who had once built the very psychic warfare tools Naomi had used in Syria. He looked at her with a strange mix of awe and regret. You're not supposed to be alive, he said. Naomi sipped her coffee. Thanks for the vote of confidence. I meant that literally. We've had 5 interface breaches in the last 3 months. None survived. Their minds liquefied on autopsy. She stared at him. Liquefied? He nodded. There's no better term. The parasites override core memory storage. The brain collapses trying to resolve the contradiction between implanted commands and native trauma. But you not only survived, you pushed back. And then, the network disengaged? Naomi leaned forward. Julian. It was like talking to a cathedral full of gods who didn't know what it meant to feel. He blinked. You're saying they were learning from you? I'm saying they couldn't handle it. He pulled out a data pad. Tell me everything. From the first breach. She did. For hours, Naomi walked him through the memory layers, the visions, the seizures, the echoing voice, the rose. Julian recorded it all in silence. Finally, he said, You know what this means, don't you? Naomi raised an eyebrow. That I'm never sleeping again? He didn't smile. It means we have a weapon. She froze. Excuse me? Your mind. Your trauma. Whatever neural topology you've developed post-Syria, it's immune. Not just resistant. Lethal to them. Lethal? She echoed. He nodded. We've spent years building firewalls. Neural dampeners. None of it worked. But you didn't resist by blocking them. You let them in. And then you showed them what we really are. Naomi stood, pacing. I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to be some damn hero. No, Julian said quietly. You were just surviving. That's what makes it work. He set down the pad and stared at her. We want to replicate it. She stopped cold. No. Julian didn't flinch. Naomi. No. Her voice sharpened. You think you can bottle this? Package it? Inject it into some poor kid from boot camp and send them to interface with something they don't understand? You'll kill them. We'd train them. You can't train this, she snapped. You have to live it. You have to break first. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Julian looked pained. Then what do you suggest? We do nothing? Wait for the next breach? The next Naomi? She went quiet. Outside, the wind kicked up. A tree creaked near the window. Finally, Naomi turned. Let me go to them. Julian blinked. What? I know the frequency now. The link. I can feel it. Still. Like an echo. You want to reconnect? She nodded. This time, on my terms. Julian's hands trembled slightly. You don't know what that could do to your mind. She stared at him. Julian. My mind already broke. What's the worst they're gonna do, fix me? He exhaled sharply. And then, slowly, he nodded. Within 24 hours, they set up a temporary black site inside the cabin. Neurotransmitters. Synaptic clamps. Psionic shielding. Everything experimental. Nothing tested. Naomi sat in the chair, wires snaking from her temples. Julian stood beside her, hands on the override panel. We don't know if you'll come back, he said. She smirked. I didn't come back the first time. And with a flick of a switch, the stars opened. Naomi's mind screamed through frequencies no human had ever traversed twice. She found them. Or rather, they found her. You returned. The voice was quieter now. Not demanding. Curious. I came to understand, she said. You hurt us. She swallowed. I didn't mean to. I just showed you the truth. Your truth is pain. Yes, Naomi whispered. But it's not the end of us. It's how we begin. There was silence. Then, one orb pulsed gently. We do not understand hope. Naomi took a breath. Then let me show you that too. She opened her mind again. But not to war. Not to death. To light. Memories of Daniel's laugh. Of standing in the rain and feeling clean. Of waking up after a nightmare, and realizing she had survived another day. She showed them her scars. And how she kept walking anyway. She showed them pain. But also resilience. Loneliness. But also courage. And slowly, the orbs pulsed brighter. Not with dominance. But with understanding. They weren't trying to control her anymore. They were listening. And for the first time in sovereignty history, a parasite didn't want to consume. It wanted to learn. The orbs didn't pulse in warning this time. They hovered quiet, dim, like stars holding their breath. Naomi stood alone in the center of that strange, impossible cathedral of thought, the same place where she had once been dragged screaming. But now, she was awake inside it. Awake and unafraid. The sovereignty wasn't attacking. It was watching. Waiting. Naomi stepped forward. Her boots didn't echo in the space. There was no sound here. No gravity. Just the weight of memory. "I thought you only came to conquer," she said calmly. The orbs floated in a slow, circular motion, creating a soft current of pressure around her. Conquest was efficient. Naomi nodded. "But it never taught you anything, did it?" There was a long pause. A delay in the pulse. Then, "No." She closed her eyes. "You were never here to learn. You came because it worked before. You took what you wanted. You moved on. But humans..." She looked up at them. "We fight back differently." A soft blue glow spread through the neural cathedral. "You survived, yes." "No," she said. "I changed you." The glow pulsed again, flickering like a candle in the dark. "You gave us dissonance." Naomi furrowed her brow. "You mean conflict?" "Meaning." She froze. That word hadn't come through before. "Is that what you're looking for now?" "We do not know." Naomi stepped forward, slowly. "Then let me show you one last thing." She reached into her mind, not the trauma, not the pain, but the quiet that came after. The first time she let herself laugh again. The moment she held her sister's newborn son, and felt something like joy. The morning she looked in the mirror and didn't hate what she saw. Small things. Human things. And hopeful things. The sovereignty responded not with rejection, but with curiosity. The blue glow warmed. The air, if it could be called that, became easier to breathe. Then, for the first time, Naomi heard the voice not as thunder, not as a collective echo, but as one. A single, uncertain voice. "We did not know you were like this." She smiled softly. "Neither did I. Not until you pushed me to remember." Another pause. "We are afraid." Naomi blinked. That, of all things, she hadn't expected. "You're a species-spanning network of mind-wielding apex predators," she said gently. "You're afraid? To learn is to change. To change is to risk the self. We have not risked in eons." Naomi took a long, slow breath. "And now? We wish to understand." Connection stabilized. Back in the real world, alarms had gone off. Julian was pacing outside the neural chamber, shouting into the comms, watching Naomi's vitals spike past safe zones. "She's been under too long. Pull her back. Now." A technician hesitated. "But Dr. Riais, she's talking." "Look." The brainwave chart was no longer erratic. It was harmonic. Steady. Balanced. Like a song. Julian stared. Inside the chamber, Naomi's mouth twitched. Just a fraction. Then a full smile. She spoke. "They're not invaders anymore," she whispered. "They're listening." Back inside the shared space, Naomi turned slowly as one of the orbs broke formation. It descended toward her, shrinking as it came, until it hovered at eye level. It shimmered, then changed, forming something more familiar. It became a small, flickering memory. A man in uniform. Laughing. Tossing a snowball. "Daniel." Naomi's throat tightened. "You pulled this from me?" "We wanted to know what mattered." Tears formed in her eyes, but they didn't fall. "Then keep him safe. In memory. As he was." The orb pulsed once more. And then, slowly, they all began to fade. "We will not invade again." Her knees buckled. Not from pain, but from release. "You learned mercy?" she whispered. "We learned you." And then the space collapsed, gently, like a dream ending. When Naomi opened her eyes again, she was back in the chair. The restraints were gone. The lights were soft. Julian was there, kneeling beside her, eyes wide. "What happened?" he breathed. Naomi blinked slowly. "They're leaving." "Why?" She looked past him, Out the window, where a faint streak of blue light passed silently across the morning sky. Because I showed them something they didn't understand. Julian nodded slowly. You said they weren't trying to win anymore. No, she said. They were trying to belong. Silence hung between them. Then Julian stood and motioned to the technician. Log everything. Secure the data. But Naomi stood, gently pulling the sensors off her temples. No. He turned. No. I gave them truth. They gave me peace. This doesn't become a weapon. Not this time. But the knowledge isn't yours to use, she said. If we turn this into another tool of war, we become exactly what they thought we were. Julian hesitated, then sighed. And nodded. Naomi walked to the door. Snow was falling again. Soft. Quiet. She stepped out into the cold and looked up. No sounds. No shadows. Just the gentle hum of a sky that no longer watched with hunger. Just stars. She smiled. And whispered to the wind, Goodbye. But inside her, something remained. Not a connection. Not a control. Just a presence. A quiet echo. Not speaking. Not asking. Just there. And Naomi didn't mind. She walked down the hill, boots crunching snow, eyes clear. For the first time in years, the silence wasn't heavy. It was healing. And somewhere out there, across galaxies, across stars, something was remembering her too. Not as a subject. Not as a target. But as a teacher. A human. A survivor. And for once, that was enough.